On my wedding day, my mother-in-law slapped me and said, "You'll never belong here." I stayed silent then. But years later, I bought the mansion she begged outside of. On my wedding day, my mother-in-law slapped me and said, "You'll never belong here." I stayed silent then. Not because I was weak, but because I had no one. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The day I wore red. The day I became someone's bride. The day I finally stepped into a home I thought would be mine forever. But that illusion shattered just moments after the ceremony ended. The house was grand, too grand for someone like me. The chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 eyes watching every move I made. Servants ran across the marble floor, adjusting things that didn't need fixing. Relatives bustled around, fake smiling, pretending the family was whole, happy, and welcoming. Austin, my new husband, looked so proud, holding my hand as he led me through the front doors. For a brief moment, I believed it, that this life, this man, this house, would finally give me the love I had always longed for. But barely an hour had passed when Shireen Begum, my mother-in-law, called me aside. No smile on her face. No welcome in her eyes. Just a cold, assessing glare. She took me to a side corridor. The hallway was silent, the echo of distant wedding music muffled by heavy curtains. Then, without warning, she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. So hard that my head turned sideways, and I tasted blood on my lip. I froze. My breath caught. The room spun for a second. And then came her words, each one stabbing deeper than the slap. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "You might have tricked my son with your pretty face and crocodile tears, but let me make one thing clear. This house, this name, this family. You're not worthy of any of it. You're nothing. And you will always be nothing." I looked at her in shock, my cheek burning, my heart thudding in disbelief. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she misunderstood me. Maybe I could fix it. But her eyes were firm. Unapologetic. Cruel. She turned and walked away, her heavy silk dress swishing behind her, her bangles clinking, the same bangles that had cut the side of my face when she struck me. I stood there for a full minute. Tears welled up, but I forced them back. I was not going to cry. Not here, not now. I walked back into the main hall. I smiled. I posed for pictures. I received blessings from elders with folded hands. My cheeks still stung, but I hid it behind my veil and dignity. Austin didn't notice a thing. Or maybe he did, and chose to stay quiet. And in that moment, something inside me changed. I realized this wasn't going to be a fairy tale. This wasn't love. This was war. And I was entering it unarmed. But deep down, I made a promise to myself. One day, this pain will become power. One day, I'll return, not as a daughter-in-law, but as the storm they never saw coming. After that slap, nothing was ever the same. The very next morning, I woke up in a room that looked like a palace but felt like a cage. Expensive wallpaper, carved wooden furniture, a dressing table with more perfumes than I could count, but none of it felt mine. The scent in the room was heavy with jasmine and silence. A silence that swallowed me whole. I woke up early, as I had been told to. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, I was handed a long list of chores. Make breakfast for Babaji, toast for Austin, parathas for the uncles, sugar-free tea for Shireen Begum. I barely knew my way around this new kitchen, but I nodded and got to work. The servants watched me like I was a new recruit. One of them whispered, "She won't last long." That sentence clung to me like smoke. I didn't complain. I cooked with shaky hands. I spilled a little milk while pouring it into the cup meant for my mother-in-law. She didn't say anything. She just pushed the cup away with one finger and left the table without touching anything. At lunch, she didn't eat either. By dinner, there was no plate laid out for me. I stood by the kitchen door, waiting, wondering if it was just a mistake. But the table was full. Everyone had their food. Austin was laughing with his cousins. And I stood like a stranger in a house I was supposedly now a part of. No one looked up. No one asked where my plate was. And so, I went back to my room and ate a dry slice of bread I had hidden in my bag. That became the pattern. In front of the world, we were a perfect family. My in-laws had wealth, reputation, and the respect of society. Austin's social media posts were full of happy pictures, our fairy tale wedding, as he called it. But behind closed doors, I was shrinking. Smaller and smaller every day. Shireen Begum never raised her hand again, but her words were weapons. Sharp, cold, and constant. Wear something decent. You look cheap. You walk like you were raised in the streets. You have no class. Just because you're married doesn't mean you're one of us. I began to second guess everything, the way I spoke, the way I smiled, even the way I stood. I was made to feel like an outsider, like an uninvited guest who had overstayed her welcome. Austin. Oh, Austin. At night, he'd hold my hand and tell me he loved me. Ignore her, he'd whisper. She's just like that. She'll come around. But she never did. And he never stood up to her. That hurt more than the slap. I would look at the mirror and ask myself, why are you still here? But I never got an answer. Maybe I stayed because I believed things would change. Maybe I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. Or maybe I was just waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the day I could break free. But I didn't know then that before I could be free, I had to be broken all the way down. And they would make sure of that. Time passed, but nothing changed. Only I changed. From a smiling bride full of hope, I had become a shadow. I spoke less. Smiled even less. I moved carefully, like every step could trigger a new insult, a new humiliation. But I kept pretending, because pretending was the only thing that kept me breathing. Then one day, something so small broke something so big inside me. It was a Sunday. The house was quiet. Austin had gone out with friends. I had just returned from a quick visit to the local market, the only outing I was allowed, and even that under the watchful eyes of the driver. I had saved up some small change over the past few months, money I had hidden from my own wedding gifts. And that day, I used it to buy myself something. A small, delicate gold bangle. Not heavy. Not expensive. Just beautiful. Something I could call my own. When I reached home, I went to my room and admired it in the mirror. It wasn't much, but it made me feel like me again, like I still existed under all the weight this house had put on my soul. Austin came home in the evening. I showed it to him, shyly. He smiled faintly and said, "It's nice. But maybe hide it. Amy might not like it." My smile faded. Why would she not like it? It was my money. My choice. My right. But I stayed silent, again. Dinner that night was unforgettable, but not in a way you'd wish. As we all sat around the long dining table, my mother-in-law spotted the bangle. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that on your wrist?" she asked, her voice loud enough for the entire family to hear. "It's just something I bought," I replied quietly. "With whose permission?" she snapped. I blinked. "It's from my savings." She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Savings? What savings? You live in our house, eat our food, wear our clothes. And now you think you're a woman of status because of a cheap market bangle?" The entire table went silent. I felt everyone's eyes on me, some awkward, some amused, some just curious. Shireen Begum continued, now speaking as if I wasn't even there. "This is why girls from low backgrounds should not be married into families like ours. They never learn class. They always try to act bigger than they are." That was the moment. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were full of hate, not just for me, but for everything I represented. I wasn't just her son's wife. I was a symbol of everything she wanted to erase. I wasn't their kind. I was a stain on their perfection. And Austin? He said nothing. Again, he kept eating. That broke me. Not her words. Not her cruelty. But his silence. I pushed my chair back slowly. The sound echoed in the large dining hall. Everyone looked up. I stood calmly. I placed the gold bangle on the table, and without a word, I walked out. I didn't go back to my room. I went to the guest room, the one no one used, cold, dusty, small. I locked the door from inside, curled up in a corner, and cried. Not the soft, silent tears I was used to, but heavy, aching sobs that came from the deepest parts of my being. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, this is it. This is the last time anyone makes me feel this small. The morning after that dinner, the house buzzed like nothing had happened. Chores resumed. Breakfast was served. Laughter floated from the living room where Austin sat with his cousins, playing video games like a teenager. Shireen Begum walked past the guest room where I had locked myself the night before, as if I didn't exist. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. And I didn't expect her to. That was the morning I decided I was done. I opened my suitcase. It was still untouched from the day I had arrived. I had never really unpacked in that house, and maybe deep down, I had known I wouldn't stay. I didn't take the clothes from the wardrobe. Those weren't mine. They were hand-me-downs gifted by Shireen, always accompanied with some snide comment like, this should suit your kind, or it's not too flashy for you, right? I didn't take the jewelry either. Most of it had already been taken under the guise of family safekeeping. They had locked it in a drawer I never had the key to. I packed only what belonged to me, a pair of old jeans, 2 plain shirts, a tiny bottle of perfume my grandmother had gifted me before she died, and a small framed photo of her. Her smile in that picture gave me strength. I needed it. By 4:30 a.m., I was ready. The sky outside was still dark. The house was asleep, and the city had not yet begun to stir. I tiptoed through the hallways one last time, the same hall where I had been slapped, humiliated, erased. I didn't cry. Not this time. At the main gate, I paused. And then, I left. No note. No dramatic goodbye. No tears. Just silence. I walked to the main road with my small bag in hand. No one followed. No one called my name. I hailed a rickshaw and gave the driver the address of a women's shelter I had once read about in a pamphlet at the market. That's where I stayed. The shelter was nothing like the mansion. It was small, plain, with iron cots and shared bathrooms. But it was warm. Not from heaters, but from kindness. From the voices of women who had also been thrown away. Who had survived. There, I breathed, really breathed, for the first time in months. I told the staff I was looking for work. Any work. They helped me get a job at a local boutique as a helper. I cleaned floors, folded dupottas, organized racks. I earned little, but it was mine. And for the first time, I slept peacefully at night. I also used the shelter's computer in the evenings, slow internet, old keyboard, but I made it work. I began watching YouTube videos on fashion design, online business, tailoring tutorials. I learned slowly, typing with tired fingers after 12-hour shifts. But every stitch I learned, every design I sketched, was fueled by the fire they had lit inside me. I didn't think of revenge yet. I only thought of survival. But somewhere deep inside, I knew. One day, I won't just survive. I'll rise so high that they'll have to tilt their heads to see me. And that day, they'll know what it feels like to be invisible. The boutique where I worked wasn't fancy, just a modest shop tucked between a pharmacy and a stationery store with mannequins in the window dressed in local stitched wear. But to me, it was more than a job. It was a doorway. Every fold of fabric I pressed, every dupatta I ironed, every stitch I observed, taught me something. I watched silently as customers came and went, noticing which designs sold fast, which colors women adored, what fabrics drew the most attention. In the evenings, I stayed back after closing. The owner, a kind widow named Rabia Auntie, noticed my dedication. One night she said, "Zara, would you like to learn how to sew properly? I can teach you." That single sentence changed everything. She taught me the basics: cutting, hemming, fitting, embroidery. I practiced like a woman possessed. I would go back to the shelter and sketch designs in a notebook I had bought from a roadside vendor. I even borrowed a second-hand sewing machine from a donation pile. I started stitching simple things for the other women in the shelter, small Curtis shawls, tote bags. They loved them. And slowly, one by one, they began referring others to me. I created an Instagram page with the name Zara Styles. It sounded small, humble, but it was mine. I posted pictures of my designs, not professional, just clear photos from a borrowed phone. I added heartfelt captions, made with hands that once trembled. For the woman who knows how to rise again. Strength stitched into every thread. And somehow, people noticed. One day, a local blogger reposted one of my pieces, a maroon embroidered kurti I had handmade for a fellow shelter resident's interview. Orders began trickling in. Then pouring. I didn't sleep for nights. I stitched till my fingers ached. I packaged each piece with handwritten notes and tied them with ribbon. I wasn't just selling clothes. I was sending pieces of my soul into the world. With the first big order payment, I moved out of the shelter and rented a one-room flat. The walls were bare, the fan was slow, but it was mine. I framed my grandmother's photo and placed it on the only shelf. Each month, I saved more, invested more, learned more. I enrolled in an online business course, marketing, branding, finance. My world, once confined to taunts and locked rooms, now opened into one of strategies, growth, and dreams. Within a year, I hired 2 women from the shelter to help me. Then 4. Then 10. Soon, Zara Styles wasn't just a page, it was a movement. A label worn by women who had scars but no shame. Who had pain, but wore it with pride. Magazine articles followed. Interviews. Invitations to exhibitions. Women who had never heard of me now called me inspiring. They didn't know my past. Only my presence. But I never forgot where I came from. And I especially didn't forget the mansion. Because just as my wings were spreading, I heard the news. Austin's family business had collapsed. A wrong investment. A partner betrayal. Market downfall. Whatever the reason, their empire crumbled like a house of cards. And with it, their pride. Shireen Begum, once so high above me, was now fighting to hold onto the mansion. They were in debt. She had mortgaged the property. Rumors swirled. Their name was no longer respected at every gathering. And I just watched. Silently. Patiently. Because I wasn't done yet. I had one last step before I could call this chapter complete. And it started with 4 words. I want that house. I want that house. The words felt strange on my tongue, like a prayer and a weapon all at once. I said them to my financial advisor as we sat in my new office, high above the city skyline, in a building that bore my name on the directory board. Zara M. Qureshi, founder, Zara Styles. He raised an eyebrow. The one on Hillview Road? The mansion? Yes, I said calmly. That one. He paused, then nodded slowly. It's being auctioned discreetly. The family is drowning in debt. Perfect. I bought the house under a corporate trust name. No one knew who the real buyer was. No one suspected that the girl they had humiliated, the one they pushed out without food or dignity, was now the one signing papers worth crores. The paperwork was smooth, legal, cold. And then came the day of possession. I didn't wear anything extravagant. Just a plain black kurta, a simple watch, and confidence stitched into every breath. I stepped out of my sleek car and walked through the iron gates of the mansion, this time not as a daughter-in-law, not as a beggar for love, but as the owner. The same marble floors greeted me. The chandeliers still hung above, though dimmer now, dusty. The grandeur had faded, like its people. Shireen Begum stood near the center table in the hall, her sari perfect but her posture shaky. She looked older. The years had not been kind to her. Her eyes widened when she saw me. She took a step forward, unsure if what she saw was real. You, she whispered. I looked her in the eye and smiled, not with cruelty, not with triumph, but with something far more terrifying to someone like her. Peace. Yes, I said. Me. Austin came out from the back, a paper in hand. His face was pale like he had seen a ghost. He froze mid-step when he saw me. Sarah. He breathed. I didn't respond. The real estate agent accompanying me handed them the formal notice. You have 7 days to vacate, he said. The property now belongs to Ms. Qureshi's firm. Shireen clutched the arm of a chair, almost staggering. You did this? She asked again, her voice shaking. I signed some papers, I replied. Like you once took my jewelry for safekeeping. I suppose we all deal in property differently. There was silence. Austin tried to speak, but I raised a hand. Don't, I said softly. You've already said enough and nothing at all when it mattered. I turned to leave, my heels echoing on the cold marble that once swallowed my cries. But just as I reached the door, Shireen spoke again. Zara, please. We have nowhere to go. I stopped, turned around, and walked slowly back toward her. She looked at me, the same woman who once slapped me on my wedding day and told me I'd never belong. Now she stood trembling. In my house. I looked at her, not with hatred, but with memory. You told me I'd never belong here, I said. But I didn't come back to belong. I came back to own it. And with that, I left, leaving her in the very silence she once left me in. But this time, I wasn't the ghost. She was. It was raining that night, not just a drizzle, but the kind of storm that makes the world pause. I stood inside my mansion, looking out the large front window, sipping warm tea. The hall was quiet, peaceful. The silence no longer hurt, it comforted me now. A knock echoed through the gate. I frowned. It was nearly midnight. I walked to the front door and opened it slowly, looking out through the iron bars of the gate. And there she was. Shireen Begum. Soaked to the bone, a thin shawl wrapped around her frail shoulders, trembling in the rain. Her makeup washed away. Pride nowhere to be found. She gripped the gate bars and looked up at me. Zara, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Please. I have nowhere to go. Let me in, for old time's sake. I stepped forward, calm as ever. The same woman who once slapped me on my wedding day was now standing outside the house I owned, begging for shelter. I looked into her eyes. I didn't see hatred. I didn't even see pity. I saw the end. I took a deep breath and said, this house is a sanctuary now, for women who were broken, thrown out, forgotten. Not for the ones who broke them. She blinked in disbelief. And then, I closed the gate. Gently. No screaming. No revenge speech. Just silence. The kind she once left me in. But this time, I was on the inside. Years later, when people ask me about that night, about the woman in the rain, standing outside the mansion gates, I don't tell them everything. I just smile and say, sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. I never spoke ill of her. I never exposed her cruelty. I didn't post about it, didn't make headlines out of my revenge. Because it was never about them. It was about me. I wasn't seeking revenge to hurt them. I was seeking restoration. Of dignity. Of voice. Of self. That house is now a women's refuge. A place where no girl is told she doesn't belong. Where no one is slapped into silence. Where stories are heard, not buried. And every time I walk through those halls, I don't feel haunted anymore. I feel healed. That slap on my wedding day, it burned. But it also awakened something in me. Not rage. Resolve. She told me I'd never belong. That I was nothing. But today, I don't need her validation. Because I didn't just rise. I rebuilt myself brick by brick, until I stood taller than the walls that once caged me. And as for her, the woman who once owned the world, now wanders in it nameless, forgotten, a shadow looking for shelter. While I live, thrive, and lead in the house I was once thrown out of. They say revenge is best served cold. But I believe the best revenge is building a life so strong. You don't even notice when they crumble.